Alright, we're doing the thing again. The One Piece YouTube sphere is going through a series-changing meta. So I guess spoiler warning for anime-only watchers, as per usual. But we are going to take this opportunity to dissect how different creators have decided to compete on the YouTube. And this time around, we've got some dark stories, because I'm not going to say who yet, but there was some pretty blatant theft happening this week, and somehow it is even worse than last time. But what is the topic of our meta? Because last time it was all about Goohead Luffy, however he has since fallen out of favor, because as it turns out he didn't actually exist, and now it's all about the Gear 5th Sun God Luffy. This is the concept that pretty much every One Piece YouTuber worldwide had to design for. And usually I'd show you mine first, but I want to save that for a more relevant moment, because this time we are going to begin with Anime Balls Deep. This style of thumbnail is what I like to call a big effing mess, which is not meant as a pejorative, quite the opposite really. It's the idea that they're trying to cram every possible piece of substance into this minuscule rectangle. And as a result, when done correctly, you get the feeling that these videos have a ton of value to offer, so much that you couldn't even fit it all into that thumbnail. And with ABD in particular, there's some very basic rules of aesthetics being followed that prevents it from degenerating into a proper mess, with the close-up of Luffy's face acting as a strong anchor or focal point, and everything else is kind of secondary, including, for reasons, a second shot of Luffy, which I have to say is becoming a bit of a weird submeta. The idea that one Luffy is not enough for any given thumbnail. No, to sell these videos we need two Luffy. And another prominent example of this is friend of the channel and co-host of the Blue Banana podcast, Ohara, who elected to use the big effing mess formula, although I prefer this a lot more because yes, there are two Luffys, or Luffy, but it only has 3 objects as opposed to ABD's 4 objects. I'm aware that this is going to sound pedantic and insane, but I try never to put more than 3 objects or characters or things in any given thumbnail, because for me it just becomes a bit too much and the message loses some cohesion. But also, feel free to completely ignore me because Anime Balls Deep consistently trounced me in terms of views on One Piece videos. So this really is just the opinion of a dude in a room. Back to Ohara, I love the colors. The blue background perfectly accentuates the red and yellow tones of Luffy. I really don't know if there's a color in this world that would have been more effective than this. If anything, the only 2 I would consider would be a black or a white, but I'm pretty sold on the blue. Really, the only 2 things I would consider would be black and white, but no, I'm sold on the blue. I will say, and I did actually say this to Manu, I do think it does look a bit like an ad for a mobile game, with the level up +5 and stuff, but then again, that's not really an insult because mobile games provide massive masterclasses on how to steal people's attention, and then later on alleviate them of their monies. So this is where I want to bring my thumbnail into the conversation, because Ohara and ABD are kind of electing to fight on the same battlefield with the big action mess strategy, and I want to go in the exact opposite direction. So I asked my artist Grecia to produce this. A very simple close-up of Luffy looking as badass as possible. You can also see the color scheme I raved about so much with the blue background in action, so very much putting my words into said action here. And this image was actually inspired by Kitan from Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. I love the style of that show, so I made a terrible mock-up using Kitan as the base, and asked the wonderful Grecia if she could work some magic and draw Luffy sort of like this. It might seem a bit underwhelming compared to the really heavy and hype action from the other 2 channels we've seen, but I generally prefer to compete on my own terms, and the best chance I have of doing that is by watching what they do and then do the complete opposite, which I've mentioned before on this channel. It has a technical marketing term and it's called product differentiation. Again though, I can't in good conscience tell you that this is the correct strategy, especially since my channel is the one that performs worst of the 3 in terms of views, but I think it would be even worse if I tried to beat them at their own game, so For something quite different now, here is a thumbnail from Legend Mac, and I chose this one because it is a great lesson in contrast, because the colors here are all a bit too close in tone. There's a warm background with a warm Luffy and then this red hot piece of text. None of it really pops as well as it could in my opinion. In fact, the thing that does pop best is Kaido, and that's because he is a starkly contrasting color to the rest of the thumbnail. When things don't pop, they feel flat. And when things feel flat, eyes maneuver to something more interesting. And when eyes maneuver to something more interesting, then, well, they're not coming back. But you don't always need to throw warm colors against cool colors to achieve contrast, and to prove that, here is Sensei Ink. This thumbnail contains exclusively warm colors, but it achieves that contrast through light and shadows. Because there's like the shiny gold goo in the background, and what that does is highlight the form of the comparatively darker Luffy figure. Plus, Luffy's blank white eyes and teeth are quite attention-grabbing, unnerving in a kind of creepy way, which is good because creepy is a feeling. And when you see a thumbnail, ideally you want to feel something on a subconscious level to make you click it. You don't want to see a thumbnail and be just completely neutral, because neutrality is not a recipe for clickality. That's the stupidest thing I've ever said. I'm not the biggest fan of having the chapter number so prominently in the thumbnail. In fact, I've strongly considered eliminating the number entirely from my chapter reviews because yes, it's great for the heat of the moment, taking advantage of a bit of a trend, but they put a very clear expiry date on the video. As soon as that hot number becomes 1045, anything with 1044 is essentially defunct. Next up, we have another friend, nay colleague of the channel, as well as co-host of the Blue Banana podcast, Joy Girl, who this time around has gone for a very unique look amongst our pool of sun gods, electing to use this very chibi Luffy, which is quite cute and stuff. Although as mentioned before, I'm not keen on making the chapter number so prominent in the thumbnail, and in this particular case, I'm not keen on using the word review either. I don't know if this is just a me thing. A lot of things are just me things. I'm a strange person, but I feel like the word review kind of devalues videos, and sadly, I can't really explain why. I just think the age of reviews being like the hot thing on YouTube is long gone. And in this case, the text actually becomes the dominant feature of the thumbnail because it is both bigger and brighter than the chibi Luffy. Something I strongly prefer is her reaction thumbnail for 1044 because at the very least, her face is the focal point with a very clear emotion. And the text, well, it's there, but it becomes a secondary feature. Now, next up, we have a guy called Ryo Sensei who has an extraordinarily familiar thumbnail. And the reason for that is because it is 100% stolen. We actually examined this exact thumbnail, or almost this exact thumbnail, in our last video, which was conjured by Ohara. And everyone draws their moral lines in different places, but it's one thing to lift an element of someone else's work, but it's completely another to just cut and paste it. Ryo Sensei is a channel with almost 500,000 subscribers. He is bigger than the vast majority of One Piece YouTubers could ever dream of reaching, and either he or whoever makes his thumbnails is a blatant lazy thief. I mean, this sort of thing does happen quite a bit though, especially via cross-cultural borders. You know, YouTubers who speak one language will steal from popular YouTubers who speak another, because there's a very low ratio of audience crossover, so generally people don't notice. And well, stealing, it's a very time-effective way to add quality to your videos. And we did have an example of this happening as well with DBZ Imran's coverage of the Sun God shenaniganry. In this thumbnail, you may also see a familiar image, because the Luffy on the right actually comes from a French YouTuber by the name of Goji, who we examined in our last video. And I find this quite funny because I specifically went to the effort in that video to point out that Goji watermarks his thumbnails. He has text that says at Goji, do not use. Okay. So how do people get around that? Well, I suppose you could just cut the part of the picture that has the text in it, or you could just Photoshop over the text. In the DBZ Imran thumbnail, if you zoom in, you can still see the outline of the G in Goji, which is interesting because it shows that DBZ Imran, or again, whoever makes his thumbnails, has really no excuse of ignorance. They saw that text and used this artwork regardless, even going to the trouble to erase the name of its owner. Now, to be completely fair, I do not know that DBZ Imran or his thumbnail smith directly took this from Goji and maliciously photoshopped over it. This could simply be an image that they found elsewhere online from someone who had previously stolen it, because again, to be fair to DBZ Imran, this image popped up a lot. Goji's image was the most common Sun God thumbnail image I came across this week, and honestly, it makes me lose my faith in humanity a bit, because none of these people whose thumbnails I'm showing are small YouTubers. They all have quite large followings in their respective cultural spheres, and it's just kind of crummy that Goji went to the trouble to make or commission something unique, only for everyone else to go ahead and use it to make their own money. I do think there is a difference between using an individual's work versus using the work of, say, Shueisha and Toei, because in the latter case, that is the media that we're reviewing. We should be able to use it, but individual fan art is different. To get us back on track, let's check in with Tekking 101, who as always has elected to go ahead and just do his own thing. And what I will say is that there are some very, very good ratios happening here. A perfect example of the rule of thirds, with the text taking up 2/3 of the space and the devil fruit occupying that final third. It needs a face though. In 99% of cases, I don't think that thumbnails without faces are optimal. Faces are the things that catch the human eye the best, and in isolation, yes, this thumbnail is fine enough, but when looking at it on the YouTube homepage or recommended, it is going to be surrounded by thumbnails that do have faces, and therefore automatically last in line for attention. But to his credit, he has gone to every effort not to spoil the Sun God imagery, which we cannot say of of many, not even me, in fact especially not me. Next up is a thumbnail from Unami, which is a nice simple image actually. I mean, it accomplishes everything it needs to, because it just needs to promise a fun Gear 5th Luffy, and the dark background nicely contrasts him. And it's appropriate for the atmosphere on Onigashima right now. And getting that atmosphere right is very important because this thumbnail does the thing. By which I mean it does the fake subtitles. I had no idea how prevalent this technique was before now, and I'm almost curious to try it out on a Grand Line review video, because I do like the potential stories they can tell. The idea that you can give a character dialogue and express ideas and still not take up too much of the thumbnail real estate. I don't know if I ever will though, because my thumbnails don't tend to suit the technique, mostly because they're not done trying to replicate the anime style, so it might be a bit of a clash trying to put subtitles over something so clearly fake. Mr. Morge is in De House now, with an offering that, it's very on brand. It's using the wonderful Morge Bright Yellow against dark reds and blacks. It is such a good combination, but yeah, I don't know. I get that it's probably to avoid spoilers, but this particular image of Luffy feels overused to me. Like, it's his classic pose, it's the thing he's been doing for almost 25 years. It's been on thumbnails since the dawn of One Piece YouTube, and I mean, even I've used it on a multitude of occasions. So the classic feel doesn't really conjure that new, fresh, hype excitement thing that we're after, but again, full credit to him for not spoiling the imagery. In the complete opposite sphere, we have Anime Uproar, whose entire business model is quite spoiler-centric. And look, for the purposes of this video, I don't really want to discuss the morality of spoiling versus not spoiling, and it's not just because I can potentially be accused of it, but it's because it's entirely irrelevant to the marketing aspect. In fact, judging by raw numbers, the objectively effective move is to put a blatant spoiler in the thumbnail, which really can kind of suck, but let's see why it's effective. Anime Uproar has used the actual colored panel from the manga of Gear 5th Luffy, so it has that Oda authenticity about it, and of course he's also capitalized on our sub-meta of using two Luffy. One criticism I do have is the arrow. I don't mind that it's there, I do like arrows, but I do mind that it's red. The red arrow blends in too much with the other warm colors, and at first glance you don't even necessarily see it, so in this state it may as well not even be there in my opinion, which may be wrong, except it's an opinion so it can't be, so meh. But overall, it's pretty exciting. And that's because it is literally ripping the most exciting part out of the manga and serving it to you. And speaking of, let's go serve my dog a treat. Oh, there you are. Bucky, would you like a treat? No, you don't have to get up. I guess you are. Okay, come out here. Come out here. Okay, now touch. Good boy. There you go. Very good dog boy. Ugh, drool.